She had the front door open before I knocked. "The sink," she said, as explanation, as framing, as something to place between us, while the actual situation finished calibrating itself. Her hand was already moving toward the kitchen. I followed it. I fixed the sink. It took 40 minutes. What she said at the end of it, "Stay, I've been waiting for an excuse," was the most honest thing either of us had admitted in the general vicinity of the other, in a period of time I am going to describe only as longer than the specific occasion implied. My name is Callan Moore. I'm 34. I work in bespoke joinery and fitted cabinetry, the kind of work where the measurement that is off by a millimeter on paper becomes irreversible in practice, and patience is not a personality trait, but a professional requirement. I live alone in a flat that is full of other people's furniture, because I keep finishing a better piece and giving the previous version away. I notice things in amounts that generally exceed what is useful to notice. Mara Voss was the younger sister of a woman I had been with for just under 2 years. Jess and I had ended things the way two adults attempt to when they are being deliberate about it, quietly, with mutual respect, and the particular kind of sadness that belongs to two people who had genuinely liked each other and gradually discovered they did not fit together in the way that mattered. That was 18 months before the sink. I had first met Mara at a birthday dinner 11 months before Jess and I arrived at our particular conclusion. I had met her again at a gallery opening that Jess had attended with the energy of someone who had strong opinions about attendance. I had met her once at a street fair in the neighborhood where she lived, where she was wearing a jacket 3 sizes too large for her and eating fried dough with the complete, undivided concentration of someone who had committed entirely to the activity. She was a copywriter. She worked from home. The flat showed this, lived in at every hour in the way that only holds when the person inhabiting it is always present, books open at both ends of the sofa, a tin of colored pens beside the coffee maker, a cactus on the windowsill that had the energy of something with unresolved grievances. On the kitchen counter, in the same position each time I visited, sat a ceramic mug with a small chip in the rim. She drank from it with the chip facing outward. I noticed this immediately the first time I was in that kitchen and could not have explained, in any satisfying way, why I stored it away. The reason we had not said the real thing, up to and including the evening of the sink, was uncomplicated to name and not simple to navigate. She was Jess's sister. Jess and I had parted on genuinely good terms, not as a performance or a fragile diplomatic arrangement, but actually and completely. The residual complication was not dramatic. It was simply present. At every gathering I had attended during my time with Jess, Mara and I had been civil. We had talked about ordinary things. We had both, with notable consistency, been very careful to find each other's presence unremarkable. This had required effort. I had noticed this. I had filed it. She told herself, I think, that her caution was about loyalty to her sister. I could see it in the specific quality of the distance she maintained, a half step, deliberate, held in place without appearing to be held. Her self-narrative was tidy and useful and kept things safe. I did not blame her for it. I had my own version. The narrator in my head kept describing what existed between us as nothing in particular, and I had been agreeing with him for 14 months. I was, by the morning she called about the sink, running low on the conviction that agreement required. The flat smelled of coffee, and something amber-scented burning low on the kitchen shelf when she opened the door. She kept candles the way other people keep plants. Something always lit, always warming the air in a way the heating alone did not account for. Rain had been sitting on the pavements since before light, and the windows were fogged slightly from whatever she'd been making before I arrived. She handed me tea before I had properly taken my jacket off. The chip on the mug was facing outward. The dripping tap was a washer issue, mineral deposit, 15 years of hard water. Nothing that required more than patience and the right equipment. I was under the sink within 5 minutes of arriving. She stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms folded, asking questions. Not politely. Actually, the distinction is in the quality of the attention behind the asking, and hers was the genuine kind. How long I had been doing joinery, what kind of jobs I usually took on, whether I had come to it from something else, or had always done it. "Jess always said you were patient," she said. She said it to the ceiling, as though the observation had arrived from somewhere she hadn't quite intended. "She usually meant it as a criticism," I said. Mara laughed, not the version she used in rooms full of people, the one that came out before she'd had time to manage it. I did not turn around. I continued working. There was a silence afterward that was, unexpectedly, comfortable, not the silence of two people managing each other carefully, but the silence of two people occupying the same space without needing to fill it. I noticed the quality of this. I noted that I had noticed it. I filed it alongside everything else. I replaced the washer, cleared the deposit, ran the tap, confirmed the drip was gone. When I straightened up and turned around, she had moved from the doorway to the counter. A quiet, unremarked movement of about 18 inches, and she was looking at me in a way that she then looked away from. A half-second too quickly for the looking to have been neutral. I know the difference between a glance and a look that has gone somewhere. I said nothing. I began to pack the tools back into the bag. I was constructing, simultaneously, a reasonable explanation for what I had just observed. The reasonable explanation was proximity, familiarity, the unremarkable attention of someone watching a task reach its end. This explanation was available. I could have accepted it. The evening could have closed there, and I could have driven home having fixed a tap and nothing else. The difficulty was that I was aware, with the specific clarity of someone who had been doing this for 14 months, that I was constructing the explanation because I needed it. When you need a reasonable explanation, you are already some distance outside the reasonable. I finished packing the tools. I straightened up. I looked at the counter, and then at the mug on it, chip still outward, as it always was, and I thought, I have been in this flat 3 times since Jess and I ended things, and I knew the chip was there before I arrived today. I knew which way it faced. I had been paying that level of attention, without acknowledging it, and the question was not why I had been paying it, but how much longer I intended to pretend that I wasn't. I have professionally developed capacity for self-deception. This is not a virtue I'm advertising. It is simply a feature of my operating system that I have learned to account for. What I am describing as a realization took place over several hours and was resisted at every available interval, which is the only honest way to describe it. She put the kettle on. I was about to mention that I should probably get going, and instead said nothing, because the offer had been made in the same register as stay at the door, quietly, without preamble, with the specific tone of a person who has already made the internal decision and is simply announcing its outcome to the room. I am not good at exits where the decision has already been made. This is not a character trait I am defending. It is one I have identified and continue to work around. We stood at opposite ends of the counter. She asked about a job I'd mentioned. A wall of fitted shelving I'd done the previous spring. A narrow Victorian terrace. The kind of space that required working with the architecture rather than against it. She asked the specific kind of questions that mean the person is building a picture in their mind, not filling time. When I described how I'd fitted the units around an existing fireplace, finding the rhythm of the space rather than imposing one, She was quiet for a moment before she said, "I never thought about furniture as something that fits a person the way it fits a space." "The things that last usually do both," I said. I heard what I'd said. I let it sit there. She looked up from her mug, held the eye contact one beat longer than casual. Then, looked back down. "Yeah," she said quietly. "That's right." That landed somewhere specific. My internal commentary observed that I had produced an inadvertent statement of some weight and was now standing in someone's kitchen, waiting to find out what became of it. I decided to drink my tea. This was not a sound decision. I was making it anyway. 3 weeks before she called, I had come across her outside the building. She was carrying 2 bags of groceries, one of which was failing structurally in a visible and escalating way, and I had taken it from her without asking, because asking would have taken longer than simply doing it. She had said thank you in a voice that was slightly more careful than the situation required. I had thought about the specific quality of that thank you on the drive home, told myself it was nothing, and moved on. I was thinking about it again now, which told me exactly how well moving on had actually worked. She was describing a project that had been running 6 weeks past its scope. The client kept arriving at new certainties. The brief kept shifting beneath her. She described it with her hands, the way I had observed her describe anything she was either genuinely frustrated by or genuinely absorbed in. The jacket was draped over the chair behind her. Navy, 3 sizes too large. The same one from the street fair, from the gallery, from every room I had ever seen her in. It had stopped being a garment and become a feature of any space she occupied. "You keep returning to one specific element," I said, "in what they want. You've come back to it 3 times. She stopped. "That's probably the thing they actually need," I said, "even if they haven't named it." She was still for a moment. "You noticed that," she said, not a question. She set her mug on the counter with slightly too much care and looked at the surface of it. I had the impression of someone making an internal adjustment they hadn't planned to make in company. A minute later, her phone buzzed. The screen was visible from where I was standing. The contact name read, "Jess, call back tomorrow." She glanced at it without picking it up. The buzzing stopped. Neither of us mentioned it. The part of me that had been maintaining a filing system for 14 months opened the relevant folder and placed this quietly inside. I did not examine what I was placing it next to. She topped up both mugs without asking whether I wanted more. This is a small thing. It is the kind of small thing that is only small if you are not paying attention. Offering someone more tea when you have not asked whether they want any is an act that assumes a level of comfort and continuance that the surface of the situation did not technically support. She did it without thinking, which meant she had, somewhere, stopped thinking of my presence in her kitchen as something with a fixed endpoint. I could have been wrong about this. I was not wrong about this. The candle on the shelf had burned down by a third. The light in the flat had shifted to that specific late afternoon gray that makes rooms feel like the interior of a breath held too long. The rain had moved on. The kitchen was warm in a way that went beyond what the heating accounted for, and neither of us was moving toward the door. I was aware of this with some precision. The sink had been fixed for approximately 90 minutes. At 3 distinct points I had assembled the sentence I should probably get going, and elected not to deploy it. She had not mentioned the door. The kettle had been empty for a considerable amount of time. She was standing at her end of the counter with both hands around her mug, chip outward, as always, looking at the surface between us. I was standing at my end, looking at no particular thing. The space between us was doing something that neither of us was narrating. The sound of the building moved around us. A door somewhere above. Traffic beyond the glass, settling into the rhythm of a Tuesday evening. The low ambient pressure of a late afternoon that had somewhere to be and was taking its time getting there. The candle continued. The cactus continued. The amber scent and the old rain smell and the warmth of the room continued. And the only thing that was changing, slowly and without anyone naming it, was the quality of the silence between us. I was aware of her hands on the mug. I was aware of the specific sound of her breathing, steady, slightly slower than earlier in the evening, and the way she was looking at the counter rather than at me with the particular focus of someone studying something that isn't actually there. I was aware of the jacket on the back of the chair behind her, and the cactus on the windowsill, and the fact that every detail of this kitchen was as familiar to me as it had any right to be given the number of times I had actually been in it. I had been in rooms with a great many people. I had occupied silences of many different kinds. This one was the kind that asks a question without asking a question, and both of us knew what the question was, and neither of us, until that moment, had been willing to be the one to say it out loud. She set her mug down. "I keep telling people you were coming over to help," she said, and realizing I've been saying it like it's a standing arrangement, like it's already normal. She paused. I think I wanted it to be. Something in the room shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to be permanent. I put my mug on the counter. "Mara," I said her name carefully, because it warranted care. "You don't have to say more than you want to. We can call this what it appears to be on the surface, a favor between two people who have known each other for a while, and I can go. And nothing changes." She was quiet. Her hands went still. "Stay," she said. "I've been waiting for an excuse." The thing that happened in my chest at that was not subtle. I did not move immediately. "Tell me what that means," I said. She looked at me, directly, the way she had been carefully not doing for most of the evening. "It means I called you about the sink because I needed a reason to call you," she said. "I thought if I saw you in an ordinary context it would clarify something. Settle it one way or another." She paused. It didn't settle. It confirmed. "How long?" I asked. She exhaled, slowly, longer than I'm going to be specific about in the first conversation. I looked at the counter for a moment. Honesty, I have found, requires looking away before it allows you to look back. "I thought about you after the street fair," I said. "The groceries, there was nothing remarkable about it. It was the most ordinary thing that could have happened, and I drove home thinking about you and spent 2 weeks telling myself it was nothing. Because nothing was the only position I could responsibly take." "Because of Jess," she said. "Because of Jess." A pause. "Jess is not a reason," she said. "Not anymore." And she stopped. I'm not repeating a conversation between sisters, but she has said the thing you might be waiting to hear. She's not a reason not to. Something in my understanding of the situation rearranged at a level that was not surface. "I wasn't looking for a reason not to," I said. "I was looking for permission to stop looking for reasons." She looked at me for a long moment. "That is an extremely complicated sentence." "It surprised me as well," I said. The smaller smile arrived. Not the composed version, not the one calibrated for rooms full of people. The one that came before she had any say in it. The one that looked like a person who had just remembered something good that they had not thought about in a while. I crossed to her side of the counter. Not quickly. Everything about it was chosen, and she knew this, and she did not step back. I put my hand over hers on the counter, one point of contact, nothing assumed beyond it, and she turned her hand so that her fingers closed around mine. We held that for a moment that was long enough to be a decision made by both of us. Not by me alone, not by what I wanted alone, but by both of us together, which was the only version of it that meant anything. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. We both looked at it. "Jess, call back tomorrow." A beat. Then Mara laughed, quietly at first, and then fully, the laugh that arrives before you have any say in it, and I found I was also laughing, both of us at the absolute, precise comedy of the timing, at the specific absurdity of the universe choosing that moment, and the weight of everything that had been building in that kitchen for 90 minutes and 14 months released itself sideways into something warm and slightly ridiculous and entirely real. The candle kept burning. The chip on the mug faced outward. The flat smelled of amber and old rain and something that felt, for the first time, very much like relief. 6 weeks later, I came back. There was nothing to fix. She had the kettle on before I knocked. I do not know how she knew the timing. She simply did. The jacket was on the back of the same chair. The cactus had been relocated to the kitchen counter and was no less opinionated for the change. By late spring, there was a second mug on the counter. She had found it at a weekend market, ceramic, squat, with a small imperfection in the glaze along the rim where the clay had bubbled slightly in the kiln. She handed it to me without explanation on the first morning I stayed, and I understood it to be both a practical object and a declaration. "Why this one?" I asked. "It's imperfect," she said. "I thought you'd feel at home." I had nothing adequate to say to that. I used the mug. It is still on the counter. She still corrects my grammar when I send her project notes. I still overestimate how long I can go without coffee. She still wears the jacket, or drapes it, or leaves it somewhere in whatever room we're in, always present, always the same. The dynamic between us is unchanged. The label on it is different. 2 years on, when people ask how it started, she says, "He came to fix the sink." She delivers this with complete composure, which is remarkable given that it is true and entirely beside the point. I say, she asked me to stay. Neither of us mentions the 18 months that came before, the gallery, the street fair, the grocery bags, the look that ended a half-second too soon, and then, eventually, one that didn't. Nothing between us had appeared from nowhere. It had simply stopped being ignored. And it turned out that was the better story anyway. What would you have done if someone you'd been too careful around finally gave you permission to stop being careful? And have you ever known something was real before you had the language to say it out loud? Leave your answer in the comments. If this one stayed with you, a like and a subscribe means I'll keep making them, and I'll see you in the next one.